Rob Cole is a forester with New York State DEC Forest Health and a certified arborist. Rob earned an associate's in forest technology and a bachelor's in forestry from SUNY-ESF. He started his career with DEC Lands and Forests in 2006. Rob led emerald ash borer management activities from 2009 to 2016 and the Southern Pine Beetle Response from 2015 to 2018. And he has guided he's guided Lands and Forests Oak Wilt response since 2009. Rob co-leads Land and Forests project to characterize and manage white pine decline. So please welcome Rob.
Morning, everybody. I'm Rob Cole, as Bill said, a forester and certified arborist. Been with the department about 15 years now, or a little over. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the current things going on Long Island, and I've got some bigger statewide things to talk about as well. Just to start off, I'm going to talk about the work that we're doing here at DEC in Lands and Forests, but a lot of our funding comes from the U.S. Forest Service, so they fund a lot of this work, and we work with a lot of partners. So we work with Ag and Markets a lot, and state parks, Long Island Pine Barrens Commission, Dan Gilrain at Suffolk County, and several of you folks. So as I go through and talk about this work, I don't want to claim credit for all of it. I'm certainly not. It's just sometimes we got a lot of partners going on, and I forget to mention some of them. So I want to put that right out front, that we do work with a lot of folks, and some of this may not be all us. I am going to start out with just a slight conversation on invasive species here. I think we all know what they are: non-natives that cause harm to the environment, the economy, or human health. So here in Lands and Forests at DEC, I'm part of the Bureau of Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. And like I said, I'm a forester, so I focus on tree issues. But in our invasive species section, particularly, they handle all sorts of things: terrestrial, not only insects, but also plants. And then we have the whole aquatic side. So it's great to hear about all these these different entities on Long Island coming together and working on your little piece of the puzzle down there, and forming some bigger umbrella groups to pull everybody together, like the PRISM here. But just as you go through and think about the work that you're doing, if you haven't been in contact with somebody from DEC, either directly or through Bill at the PRISM or somebody, just keep that in mind, because we may have funding opportunities. We may have field crews out working on some of the same things, and we can share resources, work together on some of this stuff. So just keep that in mind. Snakehead up here, there's snakehead fish in a small area in Queens. It's expanding up the Delaware watershed. We have staff that focus on aquatic issues like that. Then you have things like spotted lanternfly, which DEC is a bit involved in, but we're also coordinating a lot with Ag and Markets, because that's a significant ag pest that also impacts some trees. So we work together on that. And then, the straight up forest pests, such as Hemlock woolly adelgid that you see down there on the right. So an invasive can be anything, plant, animal, fungi, pathogen. And a lot of these things are spread by people, and then they move to places where they have no predators or competition. So you can see in the upper right-hand corner, soil. You can move pathogens. You can move plant seeds just through getting dirt on your boots and not cleaning your boots out. Pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about today, and most everything that I deal with on a regular basis, can move around in firewood. So we're always looking at firewood, managing the movement of firewood. New York State does have firewood regulations, so hopefully everyone's familiar with that and following that. And then, of course, we have global commerce. And so, how do we end up here today talking about invasive species? Well, everything comes to New York eventually, it seems like. So you can see here the number of ship journeys and the ports that they go to, and you can see the intensity of some of these shipping lanes. And of course, the East Coast with New York, the Port of New York, New Jersey being a major port there. So, that's, it's one of the downsides of living in one of the, coolest places in the world, New York City, Long Island area is, it's so diverse. It's very easy to get on the internet. You can click and buy anything from, wherever you've immigrated from. People have family back in other parts of the world, and so they say, hey, I can't get this cool plant that we really love growing at home. Can you send me one? And all of a sudden you got commerce moving things all around the world. So that's how we get a lot of the stuff that we've got. That's just a quick background, how we kind of got here to this discussion. So the first thing I'm going to cover is oak wilt. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with oak wilt. I'm going to talk a little bit here on this slide about how it moves around and how that looks out on the landscape. So oak wilt moves two ways. It's a fungus. The fungal spores move on insects that have fed on spore mats, or it moves through the roots from one infected tree to another. So if you look at the graphic on the left, you can start out in that the tops cycle there with the pressure pad, and then it moves up to the insects feeding on the pressure pad, and then they fly to an uninfected tree that has some sort of wound on it, either a crack in the bark, maybe a broken branch from a windstorm, pruning, just for any reason. The nididulid goes in there, spreads the fungal spores around as it feeds underneath the bark. And then within 4 to 6 weeks, that healthy red oak, 4 to 6 weeks, red oak can be killed completely. If this is a white oak tree, that can take several years because of the tyloses are better in the white oak and can wall off. So if you get an infected nididulid in a branch in white oak, you might lose 1 or 2 branches at a time, big limbs before the tree dies in 5 or 7 years. But with red oak, 4 to 6 weeks. So it'll leaf out green at the beginning of the growing season, and then July or August, depending on when it became infected, it'll wilt and die. And then once you've got it in a tree, it moves through the roots, and red oaks root graft together quite frequently. White oaks a little bit less. We worry about root grafting less with white oaks. It goes down into the roots, it moves from tree to tree, and then you end up with a local underground spread. So this picture on the right, some of you may have seen this. I use this as an example all the time. So if you've seen another talk, you've probably seen this. But you got the center tree that's pretty well defoliated and dead in the center of the picture. And to the right of that, about 10 feet, there was another tree. In the first year of this story, that tree that's no longer there, the homeowner had pruned. She was doing work on her roof and needed to have some limbs cut back. And that was done in May, and that happens to be when the nididulids are out. They're out April through September, even into October sometimes. And so the beetles were out, infected with spores. They were attracted to that pruning wound on the tree, went and infected the tree. By the beginning of August,
with the leaf discoloration, if most of the leaves drop 80–85%, you're probably looking at oak wilt. If you see a lot of leaves staying on, it's probably not oak wilt, but there are other issues that we can diagnose. Like I said, 2-line chestnut borer, that's one common one where all the leaves will wilt, but they stay on the tree through the end of the season. So for oak wilt, we're looking for discolored leaves falling on the ground during the middle of the summer. We have a couple new interesting things coming up. We've been working on trapping the nididulid beetles to use that as an early detection tool. So you may recall it's been a number of years since we've had an oak wilt positive tree on Long Island. And we're out there doing aerial surveys every year. but it's just odd that we haven't found any more. So we're looking for new tools to survey on Long Island. We're looking for new tools to do early detection in upstate. So in 2020, we placed traps at these locations out in the Finger Lakes. The two northern stars there are positive locations where we knew we had oak wilt. And then south of there to the Pennsylvania border, we placed some more traps because south in Pennsylvania, they have oak wilt there. And we trapped Nitidulid beetles. These are Carpophilus and I can't think of the other species right now, but it's a couple species. And again, note that if you've ever looked online or looked at the literature for oak wilt, it shows those Nitidulid beetles as being the black with orange spots on the back. And those are a vector here in New York. However, if you're out looking around and you see those aren't doing the majority of the vectoring here in New York. It's actually these pretty nondescript Nitidulid beetles that I have pictured here. So we placed all these traps and we got all positives from Nitidulid beetles. So we were able to, in these like southern 4 points that you see here in Steuben County, we had no idea that oak wilt was anywhere in Steuben County. And just by trapping throughout the summer, we were able to catch positive beetles. It hasn't led us to positive trees yet. However, we hope that it'll allow us to narrow down our search instead of having to fly large areas or drive over very large areas. We can put these traps out and do some more passive survey for oak wilt. So you'll see the picture in the upper hand right here. That's Connecticut State Park. That's where we did one of the trials and where we had some success. So I do anticipate deploying this system after a little bit of refinement, probably next season on a little bit of a more wide scale basis. We still have some of the kinks to work out, but just a new early detection method for oak wilt. Keep in mind, we are still regulating oak products moving out of Suffolk County. We do have this quarantine district in place for any oak material that is not chipped, that is green. You do have to have a transportation permit from the Region 1 Forester, John Wernett. And if you have any questions about that, you can either contact me or contact John Wernett directly in Region 1. It has been 5 years now since we've detected anything in Suffolk County. So we are considering next options, whether we should, basically get rid of the quarantine. It may have served its purpose, but with 5 years of not finding anything, it may be an unnecessary regulatory thing to have going on. So just keep that in mind. We haven't had any new detections that we're aware of. So that's everything that I've got on oak wilt. So we're going to keep moving right on. Lyman triad dispar. So this is Gypsy Moth. And for folks who aren't aware, last summer, there was an effort started by the U.S. Forest Service and the Entomological Society of America to rename or change the names of some insects, common names that are out there that are offensive or derogatory or otherwise inappropriate for one reason or another. So there is going to be a new name for the Gypsy Moth, and that should be coming out very soon. There have been a number of meetings by a committee renaming the moth, and they put out a survey recently. Some of you may have participated in that, giving feedback on some of the names that they're looking into. So just so there's no confusion, Lyman triad dispar, some people are calling it LD moth, LDD moth, but that's what it is, just in case you're unfamiliar with the name change process going on. Long Island, I'm not sure has had a gypsy moth outbreak in a few years. However, if you look at this map, you can see last year, 2021 was a huge year for the rest of New York State. We got about 740,000 acres of defoliation. So just a little reminder, here's what they look like. You have when they're small, when they just hatch out of the egg masses. That's the picture, the center picture at the top. They're tiny and they're black. They don't develop those blue and red spots until a couple instars in. But if you see these tiny caterpillars on an egg mass like that, you should be able to figure out it's gypsy moth pretty quick. But they also do a lot of their ballooning and flying around on silk when they're smaller. So you may see some dark caterpillars flying by, and those would be gypsy moth caterpillars. You can see the egg masses in the lower right-hand picture there as they're being laid and covered up. They're usually a light brown, fuzzy type material covering the outside, about an inch and a half long, and about 3/4 of an inch wide. And then the picture in the top left is an old one, so it's been predated on, and it's also had eggs hatch out of it. And then the bottom left is the typical adult that I think we're all familiar with. It's typically on Long Island. I know the pine barrens have been hit pretty hard, and some other where there's large oak stands in the past have been hit hard with gypsy moth. Upstate this past year, we had a whole host of species really getting hit hard. Again, it was 730,000 acres of defoliation mapped from the air, and we can only map it when it's moderate or worse. So there's probably a lot more light defoliation out there on the landscape. So this was a big surprise this year. It came out of nowhere. We had about 40,000 acres of defoliation in the Finger Lakes year prior, and then it just exploded into this. So just keep in mind, you haven't seen gypsy moth on Long Island in a few years. It may be coming again. And this is the kind of damage we're seeing. So you can see pretty much complete defoliation, people calling about them on their houses. But there are some natural controls, and we are seeing these across upstate. You had the virus, MPV virus, and you can see that's when you see the gypsy moth hanging in the upside down V. And then the entomophaga fungus, that's where you see them hanging there, and they're all shriveled up and very skinny. And then this year, we actually saw quite a bit of activity from this egg parasitoid, this little fly here. And we could go out, and I took these pictures right as these flies were going in and out, feeding on the eggs and parasitizing the eggs. So we do have a lot of the native things out there, natural predators, which is really positive. It means we don't have to treat super often. Gypsy moth is cyclical, maybe every 10 or 15 years, you'll have one of these really major outbreaks with some minor outbreaks in between in different regions of the state. Treatment has gone on last year, and we're planning some treatment for this year upstate. Most folks use BTK, which is a bacteria found in the soil that goes right after gypsy moth, and then Gypcheck, which is the MPV virus specific to gypsy moth. So a couple good control options, not broad spectrum. They're not going to kill a ton of other things. This is a really good biopesticide option for this pest. Other things affecting the oaks that might be confused for oak wilt or other, all of these issues. Diplodia, the spot canker, this usually goes after older trees or stressed trees. We saw a lot of this this year, especially upstate where it was actually water stress. It was too much rain late in the summer. So we saw a lot of this Diplodia activity. But you can see it's just clumps of leaves at the ends of small twigs. It's very similar to cicada damage. If you've seen cicada damage, it looks very similar, except when you get up to it, you'll see it's pretty much always associated with oak scale. And you can see the scale in the picture on the left. In extreme situations, you can get complete tree wilt and even death. So this occurred, this tree was like this again in August or early September. And I'm not sure on its chances of recovery. I don't have a lot of hope for it. The oaks are also getting hit with a lot of anthracnose. Again, we saw this statewide this year. We saw early season, and then we saw another bout of it late season. So typically we would tell people May, June is when you're going to see this type of discoloration from anthracnose. However, we did see it late season again this year, probably because in a lot of areas upstate it was very wet again through July. So if you've got leaves wilting and you're curious, you know, is this oak wilt or something else? With anthracnose, you can see these lesions on the twig in the picture on the right. So that'll be a pretty good diagnostic feature when you're looking at it. With oak wilt, you won't get anything like that on the twig. There's Tubacia leaf spot, which can be confused for oak wilt as well. This is pretty ubiquitous. We see this everywhere. And so you can see it starts off patchy with dead tissue in the middle of those brown circles, and then that'll kind of coalesce and you get kind of a full leaf discoloration like you do with oak wilt. But if you see those spots in there, again, probably not oak wilt. These are all great things to be looking for, and certainly if you called and asked about something like this, we could take a look. We work with Cornell quite extensively to take samples, and we could get additional testing done. Two-line chestnut borer, I mentioned this one earlier. This usually comes in following a drought or some other stressor. So if you have gypsy moth, a year of gypsy moth, a year of drought, you definitely find a lot of two-line chestnut borer. We saw this quite a bit in Long Island in the past few years, where you'll see all those dead leaves hanging on the tree at the end of the season. So two-line chestnut borer, it's a native. There's not much you're going to do about it. Again, it's finishing off those already stressed trees. So if you see this in a tree, it's on its last limb already. It's an agraris similar to EAB, feeds under the bark with serpentine galleries. And then you can see the picture there on the left, how it's retaining more leaves than it's dropped. Cognia, formerly Hypoxalon. This is one that gets confused for oak wilt quite a bit because it does have these big fungal mats that form underneath the bark plates, and then it pops the bark plates off and you see this big gray mat. If you're seeing this on your trees, the tree is it's on its way out. Hypoxalon is a decay fungus, so your tree is beyond help, unfortunately. So we get a lot of calls for this, and people want to know what to do. And as far as we're concerned, at a larger management level, there's not much you can do for this tree. And then a late season discoloration with bacterial leaf scorch. Again, we know we've identified this in the city in Brooklyn. I'm not sure about Queens, but I know it's been identified in Brooklyn. It wouldn't be crazy for you to be seeing this further out on Long Island. Discoloration usually occurs end of August or through September, so it can be a little tricky with regular leaf color change. But you will see this type of discoloration. Bacterial leaf scorch, again, is going to cause a slow decline of the tree. You can do some treatments, but you'll be treating it forever, and it probably still will decline and die. So it takes a little bit longer because it's killing the leaves at the end of the season as opposed to, say, the beginning of the season when they're far more important. But again, over a decade or so, BLS will take your trees out. So we kind of end up with this big thing called oak decline, and we've seen this in a lot of the forests in wooded areas on Long Island. It's unfortunately pretty common with all of the different insects and diseases that I've just gone through. They're all present and happening on Long Island in one shape, form, fashion, or time. So you end up with these dead trees standing, little tufts of leaves at the ends of the branches, not full canopies. And basically these trees, even though they look like they're hanging on they are in steep decline and they won't make it. So again, here's a little oak decline map that we made, and you can see where the risk is based on where we've observed it and other factors that we mapped. We went back through our historical data and looked at all those damage causing agents that I discussed, and tried to map all that, and then map more recent areas of gypsy moth defoliation and things of that nature, and take stand conditions into account. And as you can see, we think, you know, the oaks on Long Island are at very high risk, I would say, of decline. And we really need to be looking out for them and taking care of when we can. Because you can see the disease spiral here, all those things going on, and they all spiral in and lead to one thing in the end, and that's death of the tree. So we want to prolong the life of the tree and take advantage of it the most we can. So we got to be thinking big picture and thinking about, opposed to one disease or one insect, many going on with oak trees. I'm going to move on to Southern Pine Beetle. So this map shows a couple things here, and this is not the most up-to-date Southern Pine Beetle map. So Southern Pine Beetle, you know, New York State is considering invasive because it's not native to New York. It's native to the southern US, and it's moved into this ecosystem where it has never been before. So we are managing it, but then we're also taking a look at Turpentine beetle, and that's what on this map, BTB, black turpentine beetle. And that's a native insect that's just going to take advantage of stressed areas and pressure on trees. So we looked at it and mapped out both, and what you can see on this map is we've actually got we have a significant amount of both things happening. So we have an invasive species that's taking advantage of an undermanaged forest, and then we have a native that's also doing the same thing. So we're kind of getting hit twice here on the pitch pine front. So our goal here is to restore some of these stands, to get the pine barrens, some areas of pine barrens back to more barren, some of them being, you know, savanna with trees, some of them very thin forest. And there will inevitably be some of these really thick stands left too. So we'll end up with a really nice mosaic of stands in different ages and different conditions. But you can see in the upper left on this slide, this is can be a fairly typical stand in the pine barrens. This is at Sarnoff Preserve, but you can see how thick it is with scrub oak and all sorts of underbrush. And what we've done is we've gone in with a forestry mower, and you can see the picture on the upper right-hand side is pretty much immediately following our first treatment with the forestry mower to cut all that down. And you can see the picture on the bottom is a few months after, during the growing season. It's greened up really nicely. You got a lot of understory vegetation coming up that's really been suppressed by the scrub oak and the dense stands of pitch pine. And really, we want to create a really resilient forest here that can withstand invasive species, that can withstand climate change. And so if SPB gets into a stand, like this, where it's thin, it communicates with pheromones. It needs nice dense pheromone clouds to find each other and population to move around. You get into these thinner stands where there's a good breeze moving through. It scatters the pheromone, it scatters the insects. They can never mass attack and find each other for mating purposes. So we're doing a lot of, forest management and invasive species management at the same time that hopefully will be good for climate resiliency in the whole 9 yards. It really is a big project we have going on. So I just want to, this is an aerial view of the pictures I just showed you, just to give you an idea of kind of what we're working on. So you can see the hash marks are areas where we've treated, and we still have some stands that we're going to be treating this winter. So the idea here, again, there's multiple facets to this. With climate change, we're not sure what localized weather patterns are necessarily going to do. We could expect more severe storms. Can we expect more lightning strike, wildfires, more drought that could lead to that. So when we're working in these areas, we're also trying to find areas where we can be protective of people, the wildland urban interface, and working with Pine Barrens Commission. They've done a lot of work and a lot of planning and looking at fire history. And so you can look at an area like this. If a fire were to start anywhere to the south there and move north, it's very dense, and it would have no trouble roaring right through the forest and heading right up to the north there into Riverhead, Flanders, the surrounding community there. So we're doing work like this. So you can see in the green box, those are areas where we've been thinning over the past couple of years. That's a couple of years worth of thinning. Then you can see in the red box where we're going to be working this year into the south of there, where we currently don't have any plans. But hopefully this can illustrate what I'm saying. So if a fire was moving from the south, it would come up and hit that green box. And of course, all of it will be thinned by the end of this year. It would come up and hit that, and the fuels are going to be really thin. And it'll slow the fire down. It'll give us a point of attack to fight a wildfire. It'll be a lot safer. And then, so our plan is to prepare it even more for that type of situation is once we have these mechanical treatments done, we have burn plans written. And Polly mentioned earlier that she's working on getting the prescribed fire program going there. We hope to have, a number of burns going on to further reduce fuels and just, make the Pine Barrens a little bit safer to live in, hopefully, while also doing invasive species management. Oh, so this picture over here, you can just see it up at the top. You see the thicker pitch pine there, where we haven't been able to thin yet. That's on the schedule for this year. And then you can look further down the picture where the pitch pine are far more spread out. This is the kind of areas that we want to create so that we have good wide open areas to work prescribed fire, and then in the event of a wildfire, it gives us more opportunity to fight the fire. Beech leaf disease. So you can see the pictures on the right. Beech leaf disease causes death of the tissue in between the veins, which leads to defoliation and decline of the beech tree and eventually death. So saplings, smaller trees, head high, those are being killed in 2 or 3 years. While mature trees, it's taking a bit longer. Again, I'm going to throw out, that 5 to 7 year range. It's a bit more long-term for larger trees, but they are seeing mortality occurring in some of the stands where it's been the longest out in Ohio. So here in New York, I'm not aware of us seeing any mature or overstory tree mortality or a significant amount of mortality. We are seeing that understory mortality of the seedlings and saplings. You can see from the map, it's moved fairly quickly, or since we started detecting it, we've detected it a lot of places. It seemed to be slowly moving out of the Cleveland area, and then we started listening and getting involved in surveys, and we found it in Western New York. And then the next year we said, well, we'll look around everywhere. We'll put it out to the foresters. And then pretty much instantly it was, well, here we got it on Long Island. And you can see the map has filled in over the past 4 or 5 years of New York getting involved in the survey, and new additions as of just last year. You're seeing it all the way up through Massachusetts and even in Maine now. So early on in the season, the symptoms look a little bit different as the year progresses. So when the leaves are young, the interveinal discoloration those lesions in there. It's callus tissue. You can see that center picture. What's happening is whatever's going on in there is causing just out of control photosynthesis. So you get this weird tissue, and it appears a lot darker, the lines do, on young leaves as opposed to the regular tissue. And then as the season progresses, it actually kind of switches the other way around, where the discoloration turns light and then the leaves are the regular deep green color. It can cause some kind of ridging and then cupping of the leaves that you see there in the picture on the right. And then as the year goes on and you hit fall and winter time, the symptoms do continue to be visible. You'll see the dark brown lines on kind of the light tan dried out leaf there. Some of the lines remain green. And you can see even on the ground, as the leaves sit on the ground, if you can find good leaves, you can find symptoms there. So a little bit different throughout the year, but still pretty consistent with that interveinal discoloration. This is a small study that we did in central New York. In year one in 2020, you can see that the stand, the beech leaf disease in the stand was about 1.1 acres. And it was somewhere around 100, 150 stems, most of them being small, again, in that sapling size class. And then 1 year later, when it was remeasured, you can see the infected area went up to 4.6 acres. And then it was several hundred trees that were infected. So in a forested setting, it seems like it has the ability to expand quite a bit. We're going to keep this little study going here from year to year and follow it and see what happens. But certainly when you get it in an area, it's there and it's going to start moving quick. We've seen that in the lower Hudson Valley, looking at like Westchester County. We found it there. We found it there. The first time we found it there, it was in a couple locations, and now from our staff and private arborists and companies like that, they're saying it's everywhere in Westchester County. It's impacting everything. So unfortunately, I expect that progression to continue, and there's currently no known treatments. It's been linked to a nematode, but there's still the actual mechanism that's causing the discoloration and the death isn't known. It's just known that somehow this nematode is associated. So some folks are trying to treat just for nematodes and see where they get. And I guess we'll see. But right now, there's not a definitive way to treat this. So unfortunately, it is this one's a bit of a doom and gloom. There are other things, again, that you can confuse this with. So just when you're out there, keep that in mind. Aphids, again, with the later in the season, this could be very similar to what beech leaf disease would look like. Of course, if you flip the leaf over, you'll see aphids on it there. Anthracnose is also very similar. It can cause that discoloration, although anthracnose is generally not limited to just interveinal striping, as you can see here in the pictures. But I think those are the two common ones when we get calls and what people are looking at. Looks like we got time to a few more minutes. So I do want to talk about HWA just really quickly. There's been hemlock woolly adelgid on Long Island for decades and decades. So I'm not sure what hemlock are left, but what you've got is probably worth protecting. So we'll get down to some treatments, but just in case anybody's not aware what hemlock woolly adelgid looks like, you can see it here on the right. These are the crawlers, and they're getting themselves positioned at the base of the needles because that's where they feed, and they're basically, the needles are producing all these great things, all the sugars and everything, and the adelgids come in and suck that up before the tree gets to take advantage of it. And then on the left hand, you can see their egg masses, the cottony egg masses, about the size of a pencil eraser. Here they are in more detail. So you know, those crawlers are really small. You're looking at 0.5 millimeter there. So take your hand lens out if you're going to be doing any surveys. That can come in helpful. If you're just surveying for egg masses, those aren't big enough to see with the naked eye. So you wouldn't need a hand lens, but if you're, depending on the time of year, it may be helpful to have a hand lens. So the state of New York, the treatments we're doing, we're looking to protect high risk areas. So like this is an image of Zor Valley, steep wall canyon lined with hemlocks, you know, stabilizing the soil, you know, which is good for water quality and everything that's associated with that. So we're treating special areas like that. We're treating, you know, lakesides. So the picture in the upper right-hand corner, that's Lake George is the water body you see through there, but it's a steep bank down to the lake. So again, for water quality purposes and protecting the tree, those are the kinds of priorities. And when we're near water bodies, we switch over to an injection method that you can see in the upper left, as opposed to the basal bark spray that you can see the couple of guys there in the bottom right with the spray packs on. But the better thing going, and this came up earlier, I'm not sure if it was Dan Gilrain or somebody brought up Laricobius and Leucopius, but these are the two biocontrols. And the good thing about these two biocontrols is they feed at different times of the year. And if you're familiar with Hemlock woolly adelgid, it has a long and complicated life cycle that's happening year round. They're always out. So having two biocontrols increases the amount of time that the feeding is going on and puts more pressure on the HWA and makes them less successful. So you can see this here, the Laricobius, that's the beetle in the upper left, feeding October to December, and then the Leucopus species of silverflies feeding April to May. So that's kind of the goal. That's where the Hemlock Initiative is headed. They're doing releases of both currently, and yeah, I think biocontrol in the long term, I have some hope that it's going to be successful and we can get away from having to chemically treat everything. But the chemical treatments are keeping stuff alive until we can get the biocontrol out. So just some quick things, how you can help. You know how to spot the invasive species, reporting invasive species, IMAP. You're probably mostly all familiar with IMAP. That's a great resource. When you submit something to IMAP, say you reported Hemlock woolly adelgid, an alert would pop up on the Hemlock woolly adelgid DEC statewide coordinator's email, and he would go in and verify it and say, oh, yep, you got Hemlock woolly adelgid, or no, that's not Hemlock woolly adelgid, that's something else. So if you put stuff in IMAP, it's not just a big black box that goes nowhere. It is getting you in contact with the experts. So go ahead and use that as much as you would like. And then we have some different campaigns or slogans that have outreach materials involved with them. But preventing the spread of invasive species, don't move firewood. We have the state firewood regulations that I already mentioned, play, clean, go, and clean, drain, dry. Play, clean, go, that gets to like boot brush stations or just boot brushes, whatever, moving soil around on your equipment, things like that. And then clean, drain, dry is boating related, but the same idea, pull your boat out, drain the water, clean all the plants and whatever else might be on it off before you go to the next water body. And volunteer with your local PRISM. So I think most of you, it sounds like you're doing that. You're here, you're at this meeting, you're involved, so that's awesome. And then this is the way you can get in contact with anybody at DEC in the Forest Health Program. This might be the easiest way, but if you have a specific question or a question about a specific tree, what is this, what's going on here, something that's a little harder to enter into IMAP, it's maybe more of a question rather than saying, I found this. You might say, well, I have this weird discoloration, what's going on? you can contact us directly at foresthealth@dec.ny.gov. It's checked daily by staff at our Forest Health Diagnostic Lab. And if they can't answer the question, or it's more appropriate for the program manager to answer, they'll either send it to somebody like me or one of the other foresters, or they'll answer it themselves because they are super knowledgeable and know what's going on. So foresthealth@dec.ny.gov, great way to reach us with your questions, with your concerns. You can send pictures, the whole 9 yards. Last but not least, I mentioned the firewood. Use local firewood, please. Things like oak wilt, that's a picture on the left, that's an oak wilt, that's a spore mat scar there. So you can move oak wilt on firewood, you can move any of the insects on firewood, a lot of diseases on firewood. So please keep it local. No untreated firewood should be coming in from outside of New York State, and no untreated firewood should be moving more than 50 miles from its source. And that's it.
Thank you, Rob. That was excellent. Somewhat unsettling, but an excellent presentation nonetheless. And thank you for everything you're doing. You're doing very important work for our forests here.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm hopefully this doesn't put you on the spot, but I wanted to ask you about the future. And I don't know if you or the forest health people have thought about, given what we're seeing with diseases and pests of oak trees, beech trees, some of the pitch pine, and combining that with deer overbrowse that we have on Long Island. So there's not a lot of tree regeneration. What does the future of our forests look like, say, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? I've talked to people before and they thought maybe kind of a savanna habitat with widely dispersed trees and more grasses and small shrubs and things. Have you thought where we're headed?
And so, yeah, the things you're touching on are kind of where we're going with some of our pine barrens management. It is pine barrens, yet our pine barrens are a dense forest. And you think pine barrens, where's the barrens part? So yeah, on some of our pine barrens restoration, we will be going, maybe more towards the savanna look in some areas as opposed to more of a forested look. But what we're doing there is we're applying silvicultural techniques to combat invasive species, basically to kind of prime the forest and get it ready, because we know that southern pine beetle is going to move into that area of Sarnoff at some point. But if we can make it more resilient and make the trees that are healthier, we give it a better chance. And there's actually quite a bit of research has been done into these silvicultural practices, and they do have proved to be pretty successful. So yeah, as a unit, we have tended to focus on individual pests, which then doesn't give you really a long-term outlook, because every day it's, well, I got to deal with EAB, then I got to deal with ALB, then, oh, spotted lanternfly came along. So we are kind of splitting off in two directions. We're still going to focus on pests, but a couple of us are really working on long-term silvicultural practices for all these forest types, and looking at the different pests that are coming in to see what we could do to kind of prepare these stands, or get them back into some sort of a functional level, because really a lot of these sites are they're really degraded. They've been heavily managed by humans at some point in history, and then we've let it go for a long time, and now we have to help with the recovery. So yeah, the long-term outlook, there's always going to be stuff coming, as you saw from that shipping picture that I put up there. Stuff is always going to be coming here. It's a matter of trying to improve the health of what we've got before the pest gets here, because if you've got stress trees and some new pest comes along, there's not much hope. So yeah, we're looking at long-term forest management, kind of one of the answers to this problem.
All right, thanks, Rob. You're doing great work. Thank you. There was one quick question here about crypt gall. Do you know crypt gall? That's the only question I see in the chat.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with that one.
Not one I'm familiar with either.
That's the black oak twig gall wasp. This is Dan Gilrain. That's what he's, I think, asking about.
Okay. Okay.
I haven't had any questions about it. And it's been a problem with black oak specifically here, as well as parts of Eastern Mass, Southern Rhode Island. Last news was that we had some parasitoids found that were kicking in and seemed to be taking it out, which they were missing in Nantucket at the time, but hopefully it's shown up there. But yeah, has been pretty bad periodically here, killing back and actually killing large black oaks. But nothing this past year that came to my attention anyway.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rob. Greatly appreciate you being here.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
And